Today I'm wearing my pansy dress that I've made using the new Rosery Apparel pattern. But you might be wondering, how does this pattern work as a curvy or plus size or pear-shaped person? Well, I was wondering too, so I have put together this review for you. But before we get into that, here are the bloopers. Does that make sense? You did an excellent job, honey. You're gonna have to be back enough to see my body, but not enough to see the mess. So let's go. Nope. Jolly good. Hang on, how do I say this nicely? Hi crafty people, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be making the pansy dress from Rosery Apparel. I'll put on screen here what it looks like, the dress that Janelle from Rosery Apparel has made, and I am really excited to start the process of making this dress with you today. I'm obviously not wearing that dress right now. I'll put on the screen here what future me looks like wearing the dress, but right now as I'm sitting here, I'm at the very start of the process of making this dress. I want to take you along with every single step of me making this dress, from purchasing it, cutting out the pattern pieces, working out sizing, fit issues that I might come across, and all the way up to, at the end, showing you the final product and what my opinion is on this pattern. I personally consider myself to be a plus size, curvy, pear-shaped body shape, and if you identify yourself as being one of those terms as well, then I hope that this video is helpful for you in seeing how this dress fits on a body shape a bit like yours. If this is your first time on my channel, then welcome. My name's Marie and I am a mum to 4, and I usually have this sewing channel so that I can share the things I'm sewing for my kids. But today, mum's having a special treat. She's making a dress for herself because mums, you deserve it too. Don't just be sewing for other people. You deserve to sew for yourself sometimes. If my channel sounds like something you would be interested in following along with, then I'd love for you to click the subscribe button to see some of my future videos. But with all of that being said, let's get making.
My mum makes a pansy dress.
The way this pattern review is going to work is I have 10 criteria that I'm going to be judging this pattern against. And as I go through the process of making this dress, I'm going to be stopping at various points to give you my score out of 10 for each of those criteria. And at the end of this, we're going to add up all the scores and have a percentage overall of what I think of this dress. Can you tell I'm a teacher? The very first criteria that we're going to be judging today is about the actual purchasing of this pattern. So I have open here the Rosery Apparel website on my computer, and I'm going to talk you through what I thought of the process of purchasing this pattern. I did purchase it the other day, and I also have already bought and pre-washed my fabric. I bought 4 meters of this cotton poplin, but I'm going to bring you a little bit closer and talk you through my opinion of the purchasing process. So we are on the Rosery Apparel website here, and we have both a digital copy and a paper pattern, so that's pretty good so far. It's got a lot of detail there. I really like that the size guide is on the front there. It's got lots of pictures, so that was really helpful. When I added this to my cart, I went through the whole process, added it to my cart, went to checkout and everything. I did find that it did make me put through my postal address, which then got me confused as to whether I had accidentally pressed that I wanted the physical copy. Other than that, the process was extremely smooth. As soon as I had purchased the pattern, the download was available on the screen, so I could just click and move on. So I did actually really like the purchasing of this pattern. I thought that the instant download was properly instant, and it was easy, and it was just a little bit confusing with having to put in my postal address. So I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. Let's move on. Criteria number 2 is all about the paper pattern, and for this pattern we're talking about how it tiles together and any of the labels that are written on it, what I think of that. So I'm going to put you on a bit of a time lapse here so that you can see me tiling this together. I printed out the digital pattern, and unfortunately I made the mistake of printing it double-sided, but because I didn't want to have to print the whole document again, I just printed all the odd pages. But that's an error on my part. It's not a judgment on the pattern itself. Tiling out these pattern pieces, to be honest, it wasn't the easiest pattern I've ever tiled together. I did find that because my pages were all out of order from the mistake that I made, it was very hard to get them back in order again. I have found that other PDF patterns, they are very clear about which order the pattern pages go in because they have a big page number on the middle of the pattern. I might show that to you here, where there is a very clear indication of page 1 goes next to page 2, goes next to page 3, and I do find that a lot easier than having the little numbers that you then have to match up. Probably if my pattern pieces were still in the order they should have printed in, that wouldn't have been such a problem, but in any case, I did find it a little bit more tedious than it needed to be in order to see the numbers, being that there wasn't like a really clear indication, like that big number that I really like. I just really like to be handheld through this process. You know, tiling out PDF patterns is kind of tedious and traumatizing, so anything that makes it really fast and easy, I'm all for it. The pattern pieces came together well, there was no printing errors, and things all were lining up very accurately, so that's always a good thing. I like all the detailed labels printed on the pattern pieces. They've got there where the grain line is, and it has all of the, every single pattern piece has like a marking on it to say that that is 10 centimeters long, so you've got everything in proportion. I wouldn't say this was my most favorite experience of tiling a pattern together, but it wasn't the worst either. It was just kind of somewhere in the middle. So because of that, I feel like I have to judge it about a 7. 7 always feels like that mediocre, like meh, it was fine sort of a range, but I might give it an extra point because of all the detailed labels. So let's make it an 8 out of 10 for the tiling. So now we've finished tiling out our pattern, we're ready to move on to the next step of making this dress, which is working out what size we want to cut the pattern pieces out to fit me in particular. So let's move on to our next category that we're going to be judging, and that is judging the sizing chart. Okay, so our size guide, I have it open here on my phone and have my tape measure. So we're going to take my measurements and see what they would come out as on the size guide for this dress. So for the bust measurement, I'm between an 18 and a 20. And for the waist measurement, I'm a size 20. And for the good old mama hips, I am a 24. So I've come out to be a 18, 20 and 24 as my proportions. I think though I'm going to have a look at the next picture on the pattern, which is the actual measurements of the finished garment, because I have a feeling that being such an oversized dress, it won't matter if I make the 18 to fit my bust, and it should still have enough room for me being oversized. So let's have a look at that one next. Let's see, the 18 would be out to there. Yeah, so I think that the 18 is going to be plenty roomy enough. I also like that the size guide is really size inclusive. It goes down to a size 4 in Australian sizes, which I looked up, I think is a size 0 in US sizes, and then it goes all the way up to a 24 in Australian sizes. So I do appreciate that this pattern is quite wide in its size range. That's excellent. So I think the size chart was very usable. It was very clear to read. I like that it had both centimeters and inches. I'm obviously using centimeters here in Australia, so yeah, I've got nothing to fault the size chart for. I'll give it a 10 out of 10. I will be saying later on in the video if it is true to size when I finish making it up, but we'll judge that later. But for now, the actual size guide of cutting out the pattern pieces, I'm going to say, yeah, 10 out of 10, nothing to complain about there. So let's move over to our pattern. I'm going to cut out the size 18 pattern pieces, and then I'm going to cut it out of my fabric. As I was cutting out my pattern pieces, I realized that the size 18 was really pushing the limits of the width of my fabric in order to get my skirt patterned out across the grain line. If you're making a bigger size, you would have to cut it out on the cross grain, which could be fine as long as you don't have a directional fabric. That means that your pattern would be sort of sideways. I did need to cut my sleeve pieces on the cross grain. I couldn't have it along the grain line of my fabric because they were just too wide to fit across the fabric width that I have. I do think this would have been helpful information to have been written in the instructions on this larger pattern size. It's something that I have had to do on the instructions for my art SMOCK. If you're interested in learning how to make an art SMOCK for your kid, I have a pattern that I sell on my Etsy shop. So I have had to say that on that pattern. I do think it would have been helpful for that to have been written on this pattern as well. Once all my pattern pieces were cut out, I was ready to start constructing the bodice, and that will take me to our fourth review criteria today, which is all about the instructions. The instructions for this pattern come in two forms. There's the written version and the video version, and the video version certainly has a lot more detail than the printed pattern instructions. The video goes into more detail about how to use bias binding, both how to make it and how to sew it on, where the written pattern just says to sort of put the bias binding on, but it doesn't actually give any details there. If you are a beginning sewer, I don't think the details in the pattern written instructions would be quite enough in order to do some of the steps, but the majority of the instructions are really well written and easy to follow. I'm always impressed with how much detail Janelle fits into her videos, and that is an excellent way to understand how to construct this dress. I personally would have liked to have seen some extra notches on the pattern. there was probably a need for a notch at the top of the sleeve so that you knew where to attach it to the shoulder seam. Just to make it easier when you're gathering it up, to make sure that you're gathering the sleeve but still keeping the center point of the sleeve at the shoulder seam. And also just in general, I think the notches were a little bit easy to miss when you were tracing out the pattern, because the shape of the notches was very similar to the shape of the pattern joining pieces. The little triangles sort of were hard to distinguish between. So I did miss a few of the notches and have to go back and put them back in again. Overall, the instructions so far have been easy to follow, and this here is the bodice that I have constructed so far using those instructions. It might be a little bit hard to distinguish the sleeve from the bodice at this point, but this is what we're working with. So overall, I think the instructions so far have been really quite well written. I have read through the instructions for the rest of the dress as well, and I'm happy with the level of instruction for my own personal ability, and I think that the video would be helpful for a beginner. So overall, let's give the instructions a 7.5 out of 10. And next we're going to be moving on to discussing what my view is on the construction techniques that were used in this pattern. So let's go to the time lapse of me creating the rest of this dress, and while you're watching that, I'll discuss with you what I think of the construction process of this dress. I was really pleased to see that the steps were all laid out in a very logical order, and there was no sort of part where I was confused as to why you're doing something first or why you're doing something at all. All the steps made sense. I like that there was the added detail about adding in the side zip. I do think that that was an excellent addition to the instructions in order to allow this dress to be suitable for people with a larger bust and for it to still be able to slip over their head. I like not having to set sleeves once they're already, the armhole's already closed over. So yes, this was certainly my preferred method of construction. So I did really like that about this pattern. There were a few steps that I chose to tweak slightly with the construction process. For example, with the darts on the bodice, I prefer to start at the wide part of the dart, backstitch, and then sew all the way down to the point of the dart, because I find lining up on the point of the dart more challenging. The other thing I did differently was with the pockets. I don't have an overlocker, so I've been zigzag stitching around all of my seams, but I didn't choose to zigzag stitch the pockets before attaching them onto the skirt, because I didn't know why we would stitch each pocket individually and then sew them together when you could just sew them together and then edge stitch around both of the pocket bags together. And I also understitched the pockets as well to keep that seam a bit more flush on the side. But other than those two very minor construction process differences, the dress has come together really nicely so far, and I think that the construction is really very well done. So I'm going to give the construction process a 9 out of 10. A brief interruption here by Editing Marie. I just wanted to apologize that a few of these clips here are just a little bit blurry from the camera settings being a bit incorrect. It doesn't take very long for it to rectify though, so just bear with me for these few little clips that are a little bit blurry and not tracking motion very well. But let's go back to the video. This is where the dress is at the moment. It still needs to have the elastic in the sleeves and for them to be hemmed and the skirt length to be hemmed. But before we do those, we're going to try it on and see how the fit is and see if we need to make any fit adjustments. And we will be judging that as one of our criteria about fit. And while we've got it on, we also will judge the pockets, because I love me a good pocket. I like nice deep pockets. This dress that I'm wearing today is one that I made myself, and it's got some epic pockets, elbow grazer pockets. So let's have a look at putting on this dress and seeing both the pockets, and then we'll have a look at the fit. I would say the pockets are a little bit more shallow than I would like, but the pockets are still very good. I think that they're a fine pocket. Maybe I just put too many things in my pockets. They're integrated well, not much to say about them. They're just pretty standard pockets. There's nothing heaps special about them, and possibly a little shallow for my liking, so I might give them an 8.5 out of 10. Next, let's talk about fit. So generally, I'm pretty happy with the fit of this. I think that it is pretty true to size. I made the whole bodice, as you remember, in a size 18, and it fits me the way I imagine an 18 should fit me. The shaping around my bust is really nice. It fits me on the waist quite well. I think the shoulders are nice. They come to the point on my shoulder here nicely. There's a lot going on here because of the big sleeves and then the very high neck. I feel like it is maybe swallowing me a little bit more than I would like to, especially on a larger person like myself. Having a lot of fabric on the top can make you look even larger, and the same with being quite oversized. But I do have an idea here of how I'm going to make it a little less baggy, because although the pattern is meant to be oversized and this is the look of it, I do think that being this oversized on a larger person like myself is not always the most flattering. I think that if it was a little bit more cinched at my waist like this, it would just be, yeah, a little bit nicer of a fit. So I'm going to do a bit of an adjustment on the fit here. I'm just going to put some little ties, one on either side, and then be able to tie them in a bow at the back of the dress. So I'll do that as a bit of a fit adjustment for the waistline here. Other than that though, I didn't need to use the zip to get into the dress. I could put it straight over my head. So while I'm putting in the side ties, I might as well just take the zip out because it's not actually being useful in this dress and I can just save it for a different project. I cut out 2 really long strips of fabric to use for these ties, one on each side of my waist, and they measured 8 centimeters by 100 centimeters. I folded the strips in half lengthwise and I sewed around them as a tube, and then I flipped them right side out, ironed them down, and top stitched along them to make these 2 ties. Then I lined them up so that they were on the waist part of the bodice, and I pinned them in place so that I could stitch them into the side seams. Then I did a zigzag stitch down both of the side seams to just finish off those edges so they wouldn't fray, and this is where it's up to now that I've made that fit adjustment. I have the 2 ties here and I'm going to tie them together in a bow on the back like this. So here it is. Yeah, happy with that. The last thing that I'll say about the fit of this dress before we move on to the next category is that I do think that if you are looking to make a maternity dress, it would be quite easy to make this into a maternity dress because it is so flowy over where your bump would be, and it is a higher waistline, so it would sit above your belly. For me, as someone who has a larger belly but is definitely not pregnant, I am not wanting that to be the effect, so I think I would lower the waistline next time. I just think it would look a little nicer for my body if the waist was a little lower. But I'm happy with the fit overall. It was easy to create a change for the fit of this, which I like. So even if it didn't fit to my preference, it was easy to make that adjustment. So I'm going to give the fit a 9 out of 10. I'm almost finished making this dress now. I'm just going to chop it a little bit shorter so it's more knee length and hem that, and to finish off the sleeves. And while I'm showing you the process of me doing that, I'm going to talk to you about the versatility of this pattern. In this criteria, I'm looking for, is this pattern something that you could make multiple items of clothing from the same pattern and they not look like they're all exactly the same? And I think that this pattern really does do a good job of having some diversity in the amount of different items you could make. I like that it includes long sleeves and short sleeves, as well as a long dress and a shorter dress. I think that's great so that it has some variety in the pattern that you're getting. And I also think you could use a lot of different fabric types to make this dress. I would be curious to make the long sleeve one in corduroy maybe and see how that looked. I do think it would be pretty easy to make this sleeveless as well if you were to just put bias tape around the armholes as well. Even though that wasn't written on the pattern, it would be a pretty easy adjustment to make. So again, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 for the variations to this pattern. I've now finished the sleeves and the hem, but before I show you that, I wanted to quickly show you my earrings here. They were made by my friend SKYE, and she's made me 2 different types, these daisy ones and some sunflower ones, and they match this dress perfectly. She sells them over on Instagram, so just wanted to quickly throw in there that if you are interested in buying some cute flower earrings a bit like this, I'll leave SKYE's Instagram details in the description of this video. But let's move on to having a look at the final product of this dress. We've got 2 categories left to review. So here's my pansy dress, the finished product. You can see I've hemmed it to be just below my knees and I've done the sleeves now. And the next criteria I want to talk about is whether the finished product that I made matches the product photos. I think the style of it is really similar. I think if I untied it, then the fit is more similar to the photos. The sleeves look great. I think it has really delivered on what it promised. I think when comparing it to the product photos and the YouTube video, I think it is very similar. I'm really happy with it and I can't fault it. I think that if I were to leave it open like this, it does look basically the same style as the product photos. I think that we'll give this a 10 out of 10 in terms of meeting my expectations from the original pattern packet. And the last criteria that we're going to be talking about today is the most subjective of all of them, even though all of this has been my opinion. But the last criteria is, do I actually like this style of dress that has come in the pansy pattern? And I would say mostly yes. I think certainly making this fit adjustment to the waist is more to my taste. I think shortening the long length but not as short as the short length, does that make sense? Making it this length has been perfect for me. The waist, if I were to make it completely my style, again, like I've said multiple times, I would lower the waistline a little bit. And the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet that I think would make it more my style, and I think possibly a little bit more flattering for larger chested people like myself, is to have more of a lower scooped neckline here. I think having it so high and then the big sleeves makes like a lot of fabric in this area, which can sort of make it look a little larger. So with all of that in mind, would I make this pattern again? Definitely yes. I will be making this pattern again with those few adjustments, and I'm going to score this pattern for my own do I like it? I'd score an 8 out of 10. So I'm going to sit down, pull you a little closer, and we're going to do some maths to find out what the final score was. School teacher mode. Alright, so I have added up the total of all 10 of our criteria today to find out what our overall pattern score was for this pansy pattern from Rosery Apparel, and overall I'm giving it an 88.5% score. So thank you Rosery Apparel, thank you Janelle for producing this pattern. I have enjoyed making it, and I hope you've enjoyed this video where I've shared with you my review. What did you think? Did you agree with me on some of my critiques? I want you to know that my critiques are not coming from a place of nitpicking or being rude. I really love Janelle's channel, I loved her video, and I love this pattern. They're just coming from a place of trying to be helpful to you if you would like some more advice on how this pattern might be for you to sew as well. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like it, and you can subscribe below to see more of my content. Again, mostly I'm sewing for my kids, but there is the occasional video of me sewing something special for myself as well. If you want to follow more of my sewing and just personal life in general, you can follow me over on Instagram at mymum.marie. If you've enjoyed this pattern review style video and you have another pattern that you would like for me to also review, then don't forget to comment below of any patterns you would like for me to try out. The very last thing I'm going to say before I go is if you would like some floral earrings like the ones I've been wearing in this video, then don't forget to check out SKYE's Instagram details below. But now the video is all done. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, go get creative, and I'll see you later.